a parent's first choice as it comes with a few documented side effects, including behavior changes, dependency, increased bloating, cramping, just to name a few. So in this video, we are going to really dive into Miralax because it's not necessarily needed as a tool to help constipation, and many safe and effective alternatives exist. Because we need to dive into the fact the primary cause of constipation in kids is signaling. It's brain to gut, gut to brain, and motility, movement, and plumbing of fluids. This video specifically is for you parents because we need to give you resources so you can start to understand exactly why these things are happening and what you can do to help your child to overcome their constipation once and for all. Moms and dads, I can tell you as a parent who went through this with my own child, but also as a doctor who's been taking care of kids with constipation issues here in our practice for the last nearly 9 years. We've seen this exact same scenario play out time and time again. And in the vast majority of cases, the real underlying issue is neurological. The other things, the Miralax, the stool softeners, the enemas, they are tools to get a child moving, but they're Band-Aids. They're not a fix. They don't solve the issue of what is causing this. And the underlying issue that you have to really look at and evaluate is why is the nervous system not sending the messages from the brain down the spinal cord, through the nerves, into the organs to get the smooth muscle to contract to move food through the way that it's supposed to, all the way through to defecation, making a bowel movement. And this is where the story gets complicated because moms and dads, if you're dealing with this and you've been asking these same questions, there are a few things that you really should understand about what is happening and also why some of the things that you've been doing, you may want to look at some alternatives in terms of maybe I should try something else instead of sticking with Miralax. Because if you understand about Miralax and what it really is it's polyethylene glycol. Polyethylene glycol, moms and dads, is the same stuff that you use to go and clean your windshield washer with. It's the same thing. It is a multi-use polymer that is not an organic compound. And it's been shown in a number of recent studies to have some significant effects. And I'm going to share with you a document here so you can have an idea as to what this really looks like, because it's important you understand that there is real evidence for the dangers of things like polyethylene glycol. So this one study that was talking about polyethylene glycol and Miralax show that there has been studies that have shown that up to 72% of the population now test positive for anti-polyethylene glycol antibodies. Now, let me break that down to what that actually means. If you have an antibody for polyethylene glycol, it means that your immune system is going to have a reaction that is a dangerous potential reaction when you have this. So it can lead to hypersensitivity reactions. It can also lead to more significant allergic responses, but it's been shown to correlate with a lot of these types of neuropsychiatric and behavioral changes that a lot of kids have. And so understanding that this is something that you don't want to continuously put into your child's body is important, because anytime you start putting these chemicals in and there becomes a dependency and a consistent use, every time that you expose a child's body to it, it can also increase the sensitivity of the immune system, leading to greater likelihoods of different types of reactions. So hopefully this makes sense so that you can have a better understanding as to why we want to avoid using compounds like this. Now, moms and dads, the other side of it is that when you understand the way the nervous system works and the way that these messages are supposed to be conducted back and forth, this will give you a better context if your child is dealing with constipation, you've tried all these other things, why it likely has not worked. So let's start top down. Brain runs the show. It is the master control system for all things within the body. The brain uses the spinal cord to send the messages back and forth. And really and truly, it acts a lot more like one of these, right? It acts like a cell phone. It is an ongoing conversation between your brain and your body. And it happens 24/7, whether you're aware of it or not. I mean, it's funny. When I talk to kids in my practice, I have this way that I teach them about the brain. And I'll show them just in a really kind of fun way that the brain and the body are like a cell phone conversation. I talk to them and I'll tell them, when you eat your favorite food, I'll say it's a steak, right? And you eat the steak and you chew it up and it gets to your stomach, and you don't have to tell your stomach to do it. Like, it's not like you have to look at your stomach and say digest my food. It's like the nerves in the stomach, they call the brain like a cell phone, and they send the messages up here and they talk back and forth. And they tell each other what is going on and where the food is and how it's supposed to be digested, what enzymes are supposed to be secreted, where acid should be secreted or where alkaline should be secreted, and what enzymes should be used for which things and where to absorb the foods. It's all under neurological control. So when digestion and motility aren't happening the way that they should, it is going to be first and foremost likely a neurological issue. And so let's talk about how these things can start to brew and build up in the nervous system. So, first, early exposure to stress has been shown to be the biggest contributing factor to alterations in neurological control. Now, if you're a parent and you have a child that's been dealing with this since very young, you're probably saying, well, okay, so what kind of things could have triggered this? Well, first, moms, if your pregnancy was very stressful, it could have altered your child's neurological development, and this is not your fault. These are just things that can happen because of exposure. Okay. So, what research is showing us is that when a mom is already under a state of stress, whether it's stressful events or a situation where you're already stressed out, high anxiety, things like that, then the exposure to cortisol and other compounds that your body produces when you are under stress can cross the placenta. And it can change the way the brain transitions from the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system, which is the development of the spinal cord, through development of the brainstem. And when the higher centers in the brain begin to develop for life outside of the womb, the onset of these chemical compounds, the stress compounds, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and so on, crossing the placenta, they can delay the changeover into parasympathetic mode, which preps the brain for life outside of the womb. While parasympathetic is rest, digest, growth, development, healing, social, emotional, gross and fine motor, executive function, motility, all these things. And so that is run through a nerve called the vagus nerve, but it is really directly connected to all of the centers of the brain that regulate everything executive, everything inflammation, everything planning, everything gross and fine motor, everything sensory. So understanding the connection between these two oftentimes will explain why if a child is constipated, why many times it can also develop into other overlapping neuro and sensory challenges later on down the road. Because these things are all interconnected to one another because of where the vagus nerve lives. Because the vagus nerve lives in the left hemisphere, right about here, if you were to draw a line. And this nerve and this bundle of nerve is intimately intertwined into all of the developmental structures of the brain. And what they have found in connection to things like low vagal tone is also a high correlation to different types of neurodevelopmental challenges ranging from autism to ADHD to sensory processing, not to mention immune challenges, gross and fine motor, and speech challenges. Hope this is starting to make some sense. Now, so we have that early exposure to stress, but there is also birth intervention and birth process have been shown to be heavily connected because there is so much force that goes into a baby's body during labor and delivery already that when you add in interventions like Pitocin and the increased strength of contraction of Pitocin, and if you don't know this, moms, it can increase the strength of your contractions up to 6 times, which means that you're getting compressive forces on a very fragile, very delicate neurospinal system of your baby. And then there is the traction forces of delivery. And in just a standard vaginal delivery, right? So no interventions. You're talking a minimum of around 20 pounds of axial traction to a baby's skull to pull, bend, and twist. And think about what that's going to do to their little spinal column. It distracts and separates the vertebra. So then when the traction comes off, they come back together. And if you were twisting and pulling, they can reset in the wrong position. If there's a lot of force, like say, for example, with a cesarean section, which ranges anywhere from 40 to 80 pounds of traction, or if you had a vacuum or a forceps, you increase the force even further. All of those things create traction forces on the brainstem and on the spinal column of a newborn who has no muscular stability to protect themselves. And so you distract and pull these things apart when they come together and they're twisted or tractioned or torqued. Think about what that's going to do. It's the equivalent of you and I going through like a car accident, having a whiplash, something along that lines, because that's the type of thing that happens from intervention-based labors and deliveries. And listen, sometimes they are absolutely necessary, but I will tell you in many, many cases, they are not. And so we've seen this escalate. And if you're wondering why we've seen an increase in the amount of neurodevelopmental challenges and these immune challenges and motility challenges, there is one thing that has changed more than anything else over the course of the last 30 years. It is the use of birth interventions. When I was born back in 1975, it was around 30% of labors and deliveries had some form of intervention. We are now at about 90%. About 90% of all labor and delivery processes require some type of an intervention. And I say require in quotes, because the more that we intervene, the more one intervention leads to another, and the more side effects there become for mom and for baby. And the crazy part about it is the use of these interventions has not improved the outcomes with birth process or with survival rates for babies or for mom, and the outcomes in terms of neurodevelopment have become worse. Because if you look at where we are in the world, amongst developed nations, we are near the last in infant and maternal mortality and overall health outcomes. So these interventions have not proven to be better. They've proven to have more side effects because the management and the way that we're doing these things are not really making things better for these babies. Now, let's get back on track. I want to talk to you about ways that you can help your child to not need Miralax. So you have to understand that if we're talking neurological control, okay, then first things first is you want to restore neurological control. Well, how do you know if there's a neurological control issue? Well, number one, you can assess things. There are ways to go and see if a child's nervous system is calm and working the way that it's supposed to. So one of the things that we use in my office is a thing called a thermal scan. These thermal graphs here that we utilize are able to give us an indication as to how balanced the output from the brain to the spinal cord is. And if you look on this graph here, you notice there are a number of these areas where they're lit up in blue, red, and green. Those are areas of imbalance and increased activity. We want everything to be calm. We want everything to be balanced, like the small white dots down towards the bottom. Those are areas where the activity level is within normal limits. But interestingly enough, the area at the very top that has the highest overall activity level, that is where the vagus nerve comes from. And whenever you see interference and activity at the level of the vagus nerve, it's never a good thing. It means that the brain is having a hard time with regulating the outflow of blood into those nerve roots, and it creates a cascade of issues. So whenever we see this, we know that there's going to be some issues. This is what is called a dysautonomia pattern. So we never want to see this with a child. We never want to see this kind of stress in the nervous system of a baby. But we see this quite literally all the time when there has been these stressful intervention-based labors and deliveries. So what do we do? Well, this is part of one of our suites of assessments. We go through and we evaluate the thermal scans. We'll look at things like stress adaptability using things like heart rate variability tests that compare the sympathetic response to the parasympathetic response. And the more balanced those two are, then the better likelihood is child is going to have normal motility, normal growth and development, healthy life, everything. If we see that there is a lot of stress in a baby's nervous system, well, we know that the nervous system can't be in growth and development at the same time. So we're going to understand that the onset of high stress in the nervous system is going to alter motility. It's going to alter brain development. It's going to alter immune development. It's going to alter motor development. It's going to alter cognitive development. There's this cascade of things that we know is created by the increase in output of the sympathetic nervous system. Because the fight or flight nervous system is geared to protect. Right? I mean, look at the amount of kids that we have that have anxiety these days, right? Not just the neurodevelopmental challenges, just anxiety. Ever since COVID started, anxiety went through the roof. Well, a child's nervous system that was already on the edge, and then you put them in a situation where they're removed from their peers and they're removed from socialization and they're in protection mode and they're afraid of getting sick and all these things. Well, now their little amygdala and fight or flight system, which was already on the edge, now goes into overdrive, and they can't shut it off on their own because that part of their brain was already weakened and sensitized. And now anxiety becomes just ever present because the fight or flight nervous system cannot shut itself off. And this is why it becomes important that we're able to see assessments, ways to go and understand what's happening. I can tell you as a parent, when I saw what my daughter's nervous system's scans looked like from when we performed her scans, it was an eye-opener because there's things that I suspected, but I could never prove. And we had done testing of multiple different types with a pediatrician and others, and we could never, ever find solutions. We had done all the nutritional things, and we could never get her over the hump with her motility issues. But once we saw the scans, we understood that her nervous system was challenged. And we needed to calm her nervous system and down and restore the connection between the brain and their body so the signaling was going the way that it should. The problem is that negative signaling, right, the loss of messaging, can become hardwired into a child's brain so much so that it becomes difficult for the brain to get the signals back and forth the way that it should until a pediatric chiropractor who's neurologically focused can assess, understand what's going on, see these points of interference, start adjusting them, and then get the brain's messaging to start to get back towards normal. So now, like a cell phone, the conversation gets back to normal and the brain starts talking. And so the messages from the internal organs, like the intestines, reach the brain the way that it should. Brain receives a signal that says, food in here, let's move it through, let's digest it, let's absorb it, let's pass it through, let's defecate. And until that's restored, you're going to have issues with getting the child's body to do what it should with food and drinks and nutrition and vitamins and even, your probiotics and all that stuff, unless you restore the messages. But then once you've started to heal the nervous system, then you can start doing additional things to try and heal the gut. So let me show you a couple quick videos here, because many people have asked us questions in the past about, well, how do you take care of a child? How do you adjust a child? It's not like what you think. It's not like what you see when you are watching videos on YouTube, right? It's not the pop and the crack and all that stuff with all the noise. So this is what an adjustment looks like. Turn left and push on the pad. Turn right, push on the pad. Good, relax, look down. See you, Megan. Headaches at all?
No.
Tuck your chin to your chest.
What was that? Sorry.
Turn left. Good, look down.
I wish. Just water.
Do you do your friend's party yet?
What?
You said you were going to do a friend. So things like that, moms and dads, those are adjustments using very gentle, very specific instruments that allow us to be able to take those areas where there's interference and adjust them. Now, you saw that little girl doing movements. What we are doing is we are doing neurological tests. There are receptors on the spinal column that when you challenge them through movement, you can isolate areas of the spine and the nervous system that aren't moving the way they're supposed to and aren't sending the messages back and forth the way they should. So when you saw us doing the tests where the little girl was tucking her chin and doing those things, what we were checking for is areas where the spine and the brain were having a hard time getting the messages back and forth, because there are these things called proprioceptors that were misfiring. And when they misfire, they create interference or distortion. We call it in science, in neurology, disafferentation, altered input to the brain. And so when we adjust those areas, they restore the normal communications, the normal afferent, the normal input to the brain immediately. It doesn't mean that everything is better immediately, but it means that we begin the healing process within that child so the brain can start to get the messages the way that it's supposed to, so we can start getting the pathways to become stronger. So that's why when you see these types of things, the goal is to get the messages to become stronger over time through repetition, and then watch the scans change and watch the symptoms begin to improve. Because, I mean, when you look at videos like I'm going to show you here in a sec, right? So kids love these. They're very gentle. They're very safe, but they're very, very effective because we're coming in with very specific targets on things that we need to address by getting these areas to start to communicate more effectively. So look at this video. Turn left and push on the pad.
Did she go to the game with you too? Yeah. How did you like the game?
Good.
Good?
What was your favorite part?
I got a souvenir that.
So adjusting the brainstem area like Dr. Brandon was there, those are the primary areas where the vagus nerve lives, right? That's what I was doing with the other little girl. When you adjust those areas, it helps the connection to be restored right like that. And the more that we do it over time, the stronger those connections become. So that little girl that Dr. Brandon was adjusting, or the little girl that I was adjusting, it enables those neural pathways to become stronger. And it creates neuroplasticity, which helps the brain to be able to build deeper and stronger and more long-lasting connections so that we can restore normal function, so the messages from the brainstem can make it down to the stomach and down to the intestines and help to go and retrain those pathways to start moving things through the digestive system the way that they're supposed to. Sorry about that. So moms and dads, I want to share with you a couple of additional resources here that I think will be helpful, because if you have a child that is dealing with constipation, there are some other things that I want to make sure that you know about so that you have all the tools necessary to help your child to be able to get back to normal motility as rapidly as possible. So starting with kind of the basics, right? I want to make sure that you also understand the importance that your child needs to be well hydrated. If your child is not well hydrated, then you can do a lot of things with nutrition with limited benefits. So let's start by making sure that we are getting our children to drink clear fluids, not soda, not Gatorade, because Gatorade and those things are total junk. They are loaded with preservatives and sweeteners and sometimes just tons of sugar that will actually create inflammation in the GI, making issues worse. So clear fluids, and if you're going to do any type of additional electrolytes, so make sure they are just the pure salts, not added sweeteners and dyes and things along that lines. So let me show you a couple of additional resources here that you can utilize as well, so that you know exactly what to do. So let's start first here. And I want to share with you this. This is called psyllium husk fiber. Now, psyllium husk fiber, Now Foods makes a very good one, but there's lots of different ones. So psyllium husk fiber is a type of fiber that helps your body to be able to draw fluid into the bowel. And it acts like a sweeper, right? It helps to go and clean out toxins from inside the GI, and it expands as it gets fluid put into it from the foods that you've eaten, from fluid that's put into the GI. But psyllium husk is one tool that you can utilize to encourage motility. This is something that is a staple with every child that we care for. We always recommend that they take a psyllium husk fiber supplement as a tool to help them to be able to move things through the GI more effectively. Now, moms and dads, I'm going to share with you another one here. We also have magnesium glycinate as one of the tools that we also recommend. Now, if you're not familiar with magnesium, magnesium has a lot of different physiological effects. This type of magnesium glycinate, is by a long shot the best when it comes to encouraging motility. Now, magnesium glycinate is great because it does not cause irritation to the GI. So if a child consumes this, don't expect them to get a lot of bowel cramping. With magnesium citrate and some other types, you can see some bowel cramping with this. With magnesium glycinate, it is really, really unusual to see any type of adverse reaction in the GI. This is the kind that I personally take and have taken for many years. My daughter takes magnesium glycinate every day. She's 12 now, and she takes 360 milligrams of it every single morning to keep her bowel calm, and also to make sure that we are supporting the nerves, because not only does it help with getting into the GI and calming it, but magnesium glycinate, magnesium in general, is important for body relaxation, nerve relaxation, muscle relaxation, and it protects the pathways going from one nerve to the next, where they would do what's called synapsing. And so magnesium surrounds the nerves to help to make sure that the noxious stimuli that can come in from other peripheral nerves that would interfere with the messages is going to be minimized, because there's going to be some. But we want to encapsulate those synapses with magnesium to protect them, so that we are able to get good, strong nervous system connections, and we protect the nerve pathways and the conduction of those pathways by using things like magnesium glycinate as additional tools to help it. So hopefully that gives you a couple of different tools that you can utilize to give your child the tools they need to get better. And I would also encourage you to, if your child is eating an inflammatory diet, so not getting a lot of fruits and vegetables, I would encourage you to really make an emphasis on getting those types of things in, because inflammatory foods do mess with the GI quite a bit. They create internal inflammation. And we talk a lot about this cycle of stress within the body. There are chemical stressors, there are physical stressors, and there are emotional stressors. It's important that we try to address all of those so that we are able to calm down the body and the brain as fast as possible, preventing stressors from building up inside of our children's nervous systems. Because when we are able to restore gut-brain signaling by using these tactics, then we're able to see far better outcomes in the long term. Now, moms and dads, I hope this video was helpful. If it was, do me a favor, wherever you watch this video, give us a like, share this with somebody else. Make sure that we're getting these messages out to other parents that need this. Because I'm sharing with you the exact tips that we've used for years in our office to help so many kids to overcome their issues with constipation. Now, if you have additional questions, want additional resources, you can go to our website, elitefamilykairos.com, and there are some great resources on our blog section. There's also a great parents website called pxdocs.com. We happen to be affiliated members with it, with PX. It is where I learned every single thing that I do here in my practice to help kids with constipation and other neurodevelopmental challenges. If you would like to speak to one of the doctors here at office directly about your child's situation, you can also go through our website, elitefamilykairos.com, and request a consultation with one of us. And we would be more than happy to spend time talking with you, because if you've got a child that's struggling and suffering with constipation, we'll do anything we can to help you. Okay? God bless you guys. Hope to see you on the next one, and we'll talk soon.